Leah, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to meet you and great to be chatting with you.
What a beautiful book you have. This is a book that whether people are devoted to Charlotte Mason or not, they should be reading if they're homeschoolers, even if they have a child educated at home.
Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, that's kind.
A beautiful book. So tell me, what are you drinking right now?
I have actually, it's a little bit late for coffee, but I had some left in the pot. So I did that mother thing where you heat it up a little bit in the microwave.
Yes.
I didn't want to waste it, and it's my morning brew, so I just had one last cup. So this will be my final coffee of the day, though. I do have water as well, so
Yes, I cut it off somewhere around one myself. So I'm on
you well done, very wise.
have a choice, that whole midlife women or mom thing. So
Yeah,
I'm over on the west coast of Canada and we're pretty overcast, somewhere between November and February. And
yes.
you are, is it an hour and a half north of London?
Yeah, 2 hours north of London. So we're in Coventry, right in the middle of the country, and similar weather really. We're pretty overcast and very wet at the moment. Really,
Yes,
really wet. We
yes.
may get a bit of snow in January, February, but generally it's grey, wet, dark. It's beautiful. It's a great time.
Perfect for coffee. So I was wondering, are you a coffee drinker also? Or yeah.
Yeah, both. Yeah, definitely both. Yeah, tea and coffee. Yeah.
So when you come over to this part of the world in January and you're doing your tour, are you heading over to Canada as well, or is it
I'm
permanent?
actually not. I have no plans to be in the States, so not yet. No, nothing's booked. I think since COVID, it's been unusual that kind of overseas travel. So unless I get booked for a conference or something, after we've spoken. But yeah, nothing is certain. So I'm doing a UK tour
Yes.
and which is easy. I just jump in my car and drive, wherever. And so that'll be fun. I've got that booked from between February and kind of the summer, July. I'll be all over the UK. And I'm hoping, if nothing else happens earlier than that, I will get myself over to the States
Yes.
hopefully next August. So I have really good friends, and I spent part of my 20s in the north, Michigan. I'm very familiar with. In fact, yeah, so sort of in the north of Michigan. I love like Mackinac Island and all that kind of area, and then Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and then Wisconsin, Kenosha. So I'm looking at a mini tour on
Right.
those parts there. So who knows? I may get up to Canada. We'll just see what unfolds really.
Yeah.
Um, I'm happy that once it gets to that time to be a little bit more spontaneous once I am there, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, I invite you over. You're welcome to come over
Thank
to
you.
Canada.
Thank you.
So for everyone that isn't familiar with Leah already, she is the author of Modern Miss Mason, Discover How Charlotte Mason's Revolutionary Ideas on Home Education Can Change How You and Your Children Learn and Grow Together. And it is such a beautiful book. The words spoken, the actual type, the graphics, all of it is really beautiful. I would love to hear your story in how you came to all of your understanding about Charlotte Mason and how it infuses your world.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I have four children. My eldest has just left home actually. My first one has flown the nest, and she's 20. And so that was a big deal this weekend.
Yes, it is.
But
Congratulations. I've
thank
had
you.
almost three now.
Oh, so you know
Heartstrip.
that kind of weird feeling, like I'm
Yeah.
excited, but I'm also weirdly sad about this. So
So
yeah,
many years. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we've been home educating for as long as they were really formal school age. But I feel like I've always had that kind of drive to be the primary kind of influence and educator in their life from when they were babies. So it's very much been a part of me. But I early on, when it was kind of time to decide with who was going to school and where they were going, we began to research the idea of home education because we didn't even know if it was legal in the UK. We didn't know anybody who was doing it. And so we did a little bit of a journey with that whilst my eldest was in like a preschool for a year. And in that time, I discovered Charlotte Mason, and ironically, she was a revolutionary British educator, but the most current research at that time and the information that I could find was from American sources. So I
Mhm.
was like, this doesn't, what's going on here? Now, obviously, it's because the real surge of home education, and especially Christian home education, was coming from the States in the kind of late 70s, 80s. And that's when this, I mean, her stuff was around in, I guess, in American circles earlier than that, but a book called For the Children's Sake
Yeah.
was published in 1984. And that really was a helpful tool to bring her face and her name and her philosophy back into the forefront of our minds. So
Mm.
I began to research, and I looked across various different teaching pedagogies and philosophies. And this was the one that really struck home to me. Really, it kind of reminded me of my British schooling. Even there probably was some small influences still left in my early primary school schooling age from her teaching. So we did nature tables and nature walks and reading corners, and so there were elements that reminded me of this very innocent early school years. But I just loved her approach to childhood. I love the freedom that it spoke
Mhm.
of, but also this rich opening up the world to them, that they are able to engage with whatever you want them to and whatever you show them and wherever you take them. And they are fully capable from a young child to engage with that. And I just love that. So
Yeah.
I fell deep. I was like, this is amazing. So as soon as we began formally home educating our children, I was slowly reading through all the volumes of books and the resources available to learn about her
Mhm.
philosophy. And at the same time, slowly implementing the methodology. So this was, goodness, I mean, I must have started reading about her stuff about 17 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, and then slowly implementing it. And I didn't rush it. I didn't want to, even from the very beginning, I kind of was like, if I'm going to do this for a long time, I want to do this well, and I'm going to learn how this looks.
Yeah.
Um, so I would read volume 1, Home Education, which is very much for children under the age of 9. And then I just started to put things into practice. And it just, even all these years later, it's incredibly life-giving to us as a family and to me as a mother and a woman. And I haven't looked back since, really. I haven't looked back since. It is just, it has just been such a joy using, and people will know as they read the book, I'm no purist, absolutely not. I mean, hence the title Modern Miss Mason. But the the roots and trunk of the philosophy, I
Mhm.
think, are important. And then for any family of any culture, background, expression, whatever, can take that and apply it to their setting. And I think that's just amazing.
I haven't shared in my story over my podcast or in all of my writings how much Charlotte Mason has influenced me. And the reason, though, is that exact reason. I don't want to go into a specific philosophy and then tout a specific philosophy. That's where
Yeah,
I'm coming from, because I learned that it didn't matter which one I was doing and attempting to be pure in it. I was creating this unrealistic expectation on myself and my kids. But
right.
there are so many principles behind or in Charlotte Mason's work, and her work is very large. And
Very.
through Susan Macaulay, I think her name was, For the Children's Sake,
Susan
right?
Schaefer Macaulay, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah,
And also Catherine Levinson. These
yeah.
were two influencers for me, and they opened my world to Charlotte Mason. And at 100%, I have all sorts of um, principles or approaches that I've used along the way from her, as much as John Taylor Holt, or sorry,
Yes,
John Taylor Gatto and John Holt.
John
And
Holt.
they had a very big influence on creating a self-directed learning construct.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think some of the unfortunate business of teaching pedagogies, and especially within the home educating world, is that people there seems to be this narrative about you have to be one fixed thing, you must go down this avenue and you must do all these things right. And I I guess quite naively came into home education and came into the Charlotte Mason philosophy
Mm,
without any of that baggage. So I didn't care what people thought.
yeah.
I was kind of like, give me the books and let me do this. And then, 6, 7 years in, after I'd got it under my belt a little bit, various new platforms were coming up. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start sharing a little bit about my journey and just about what we're learning, what we're doing. And it was without any comparison. I wasn't kind of looking at other people and going, oh, I've got to do it this way. So I kind of like launched into this. Hey, this is what the Charlotte Mason philosophy looks like in our 21st century British home. And people started to come around it and say, oh, I've not seen it done like this before. Or like, and it was on one of these early Periscope videos that somebody said, you're a bit like a modern Miss Mason. And I took that. I was like, I'll have
That's
that.
cool. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we all are. That's what we all are. And it was a face that your face should be able to fit within this philosophy. And so it wasn't until I got kind of deeper into the community that I started to recognize this almost this kind of, well, just these varying pressures and restrictive kind of approaches to it. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? Why are people like getting upset, and why is there arguing around this? I'm like,
Just
why would you argue
fun.
about a philosophy?
Just enjoy it. Yeah.
Just enjoy it. And
Mm.
also, you know what, Teresa, for me, the her number one principle is children are born persons. Okay,
Yeah.
so from the very beginning she speaks of the child, and I think as home educators we can be so busy thinking about ourselves, and our platforms and what it looks like, and how it's the resources and how we can get our influence out, whatever it is out there. And we have to come back around all the time, is like, how are my actions impacting my children?
Yeah.
It's all about the child. So if I'm on a Facebook group arguing about how to do narration, whilst my child's like, I don't know, doing something completely different over there, I just think, let's get our priorities right.
Uh-huh.
Let's come back to the children in our home, in our culture,
Yeah.
the country that we live in,
Yeah.
and let's just enjoy this. I really believe that throughout all Charlotte Mason's writing and all the studying I've done, there's such a joy about how she communicates
Mhm.
education and childhood, and even how a mother should respond to that. And so I've hooked onto that, and that's very much in the book. I've hooked onto that rather than this kind of, you must do it this way, otherwise you're not doing it properly. I don't care about any of that. And that has never given me freedom.
I actually loved how you approached a coaching conversation. You asked this woman from, I think you said Ohio, who has a few kids under age 9, and you asked her, what are you doing right in your homeschool?
Yeah,
And she was taken
yeah,
aback. And my question always is it working for you? Because
that's right.
it does not matter to me how you're doing it. Like it legit doesn't matter to me. I can speak to anybody in any
Yeah,
philosophy. And the question is, who are you and what do you think an education is anyway? And the child in front of you, who are they and is it working for them? Is this actually
that's
helping
right.
to expand their horizons? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? And I think we can get, people can get so, unfortunately, we're in this social media driven world where the heaviness of consumerism and influence is in our
Yeah.
faces every day. You just get on
Mhm.
your phone and you're looking at, it's almost screaming at you. You should look like this. You should buy this. You should, do your homeschool like this. Your children should turn out like this. And our brains are becoming wired to believe it. And we have to fight against that, because I get exhausted by that. If ever it comes up in me, I'm not immune to comparison, but I recognize it really quickly. And I have to look at that and go, no, that's not my life. That's not even my culture. That is absolutely not my children. So what am I choosing today? And yeah, and it just brings so much freedom and confidence, and
Freedom
which is what we're
again.
all
Yes.
looking for.
Love
Yeah.
the word. So tell me, you have even the table of contents is beautiful. I mean that
You?
I really like it. I like how Tyndale put it together, but also
They're
the
great.
actual content. It's beautiful. Reframing childhood, reframing education, reframing motherhood. Let's talk
Mhm.
about the reframing childhood. What does that mean for you? What does that mean
So
for mom listening?
yeah, so I broke this. I think often people think of the Charlotte Mason philosophy and they just think of education or home education. But
Yeah.
my years of studying her work and even reading through all the two biographies that are available, just learning about her, and I read through a whole book of testimonials after her death, and just really wanted to get to know the person of Charlotte Mason. And even though she wasn't a mother or she was never married, she never had children
Mhm.
herself, there was something about her observations of motherhood that I thought were really important, and that actually, she saw the struggle and the reality of it from her team around her and the people she worked with, and the mothers that brought their children to the schools. Um, and the stuff she speaks into motherhood was really, really powerful. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead to the motherhood bit, but the stuff on the separating this idea of childhood and education, I think, is really important, especially when there's this narrative within the Charlotte Mason philosophy that it's only relevant when the child is 6. So which comes from her teaching on formal education. So, for instance, she says, children, you should only require a narration from when they're 6 years old. And people get really caught up in that. But I love this stuff. She talks about this gentle growing time, and she speaks into childhood as being this very formative time. She speaks about children being born whole persons, ready to engage with the world, and they're not some empty bucket or a bit of clay that needs to be molded. She says they're already able to, as soon as you're holding them in your arms, whether from adoption or birth, they are ready to engage with this
That is
incredible
so
world.
true. Because as a mother also of 4 kids, they are all
Yeah,
very different. And who
so
they
true.
are now, even as adults, I look back and go, yeah, that was them way back, way, way,
Yeah,
way back.
me
Yeah.
too.
They were
Yeah,
born
yeah,
persons. And something we incorporated in our morning time was always the quote, I am, I can, I ought, I will.
I
What
love
is,
that.
I do too. What do you love about it?
I love it because it really, again, it's that personalizes the individual educational journey of the child, that they get to choose to engage, and
Mhm.
that I am able to face this day. I'm able to do whatever is put in front of me. I can engage with it and do something with it, and think for myself and get ideas for it. And that was really how she viewed childhood, was with this: give them a great environment, set them in this really generous, spacious place, very intentionally, but then stand back and let them engage with that. And I
Yeah.
think I talk a little bit about the helicopter parenting in the book, and this kind of hovering around and controlling. And we naturally want to control. And you and I know that as our kids get older, you lose all that, don't you? You're like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
have no.
My oldest is very independent right from the get-go, so
Oh,
she
yeah.
taught me.
Yeah.
Yes, but they all are, all of
Yeah,
them.
they
Yeah,
are. But yet she offers this idea around the power of the atmosphere, and
yeah,
that we get to
yeah.
set it up for them. And it's not just this laissez-faire, whatever happens, whatever will be, but our place. So she talks about this thing called masterly inactivity, and I've got a whole chapter on that in the book. And masterly inactivity is being intentional with their space and with the resources and with what you do, but then choosing to stand back and watch, letting them engage with that. So even comes down to reading these beautiful living books and then
Yeah.
saying to them, what did you hear, what did you love about it, which character did you most relate to, rather than this set of questions that are really closed, like, what date did this happen, and what color was the man's hat. Is leaving It's a very spacious philosophy, and that really speaks to me. Like, it's just this wide open space, and she talks about children being set in a large room, and that the world is a big place. There are so many amazing ideas for them to grab at and grasp at if we just set them in the place to be able to do that. And so yeah, I mean, her whole concept of childhood and her approach was just so freeing, and I love it. I love that. And it's the difference between, oh, just let them do what they want with this is very much the mother has an intentional role, but the child gets to move and be in and enjoy the room that she gives her. But they know that they're safe, they know they're nurtured, and they know they're provided for. And I mean, I just think that's wonderful.
It's a beautiful childhood. It is. And that actually compels me to ask you things both about the motherhood, reframing motherhood, and also reframing education, because that all really is like the holy trinity of Charlotte Mason.
It really is, and it really does tie together. So the education part in the book, particularly, I do focus on um, helping people understand what a living book is, because it's
Yeah.
such a big part of the philosophy. And so I've got a whole chapter on that, like helping you understand. And I don't have book lists. I don't even provide. There are plenty of people who do, but I've never been. I don't think I'm wired that way to kind of give set lists out to people. But I will always equip people to discern, to learn to discern what a living book is. And once you get it, you can form your own library and your own list. And yeah, we're inspired by other people's recommendations. But honestly, Teresa, I have taken books from people's recommendations numerous times, and my kids have hated them. And they just haven't worked.
Yeah. I love
So
Swiss Family Robinson. That was a book or a story that I grew up on television and loved it. And when my son and I read it last year, we were like, whoa, whoa, there's a lot of heavy-handed stuff going in, like the classical version, not the
yeah.
abridged, the
Oh
abridged.
yeah.
And then we didn't like it. We didn't like
Mhm.
it. But and yeah, I'll just say I
Yeah.
didn't like it, and I was surprised by that. But there's
Yeah.
so many new books always coming up. There's always another one and a beautiful one that you can add to your collection. But I just want to say for everybody listening, what's your first Goodreads follower? Literally.
And I am
I
so,
was
I
the
feel so,
one.
you know what? And I'm so embarrassed by that because I'm terrible on Goodreads. I am terrible. I'm so inconsistent. And I actually have two accounts. I
Yeah,
don't know which one you follow, but there's one that I haven't touched for
I'm,
years and
I'm
years
not
and
good at
years.
it this year. Yeah.
Okay, there's another one which I at the beginning of 2022 I was like, right, I'm going to list all my books this year. I don't know when I stopped. It may have been like 4 months. But I am diligent. On my phone, I have an Apple Note, and I have a list of all the books I read. So I don't know if it's just the sharing thing. I don't know. But anyway, the other day I thought I must update my Goodreads, but I don't even put kids' books on there. They're just
Yeah.
the books that I'm personally, and that comes from the motherhood thing, really. So I talk about living books. I talk about narration, the power of narration, because that is such a vital tool. I think if people can understand the power of it, then you're more inclined to make it a practice in your home.
For
Again, I
people
think,
that are new to this concept of narration, what do you mean in a snapshot? But which,
yeah,
by the
so
way, you can learn about this on Leah's podcast because her
yeah.
last podcast episode was all about learning.
That's right. It was,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm.
narration, it really comes from that concept that once you teach something, you know it better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been talking for years and years and years about the Charlotte Mason philosophy. It is ingrained in me. It comes naturally to me, but it is mine. It's become mine. And so a child can the link between the living resources and living books is very much connected with whether that you can narrate from it. So what narration is, a telling back. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
So and it's not just from books. It can be from a painting, a poem. It can be from a beautiful view in nature. But it's just an opportunity for a child to experience, engage with something, whether a book or a visual thing or a piece of music, and then them being given the opportunity straight afterwards to say what they heard or saw or listened to, and that is called narration. And it's a big concept within the philosophy, and it's not just that immediate, but it's going back to it again as a point of revision, of asking again.
Yeah.
So I've got a whole chapter on that, which really helps people understand what that means. And you know what? I've got it right in front of me. I can't remember what the other chapters are from the education. I need to have a quick flick. Here we go. Oh yes, nature study, because that's huge within the
That's what I
philosophy.
think of for sure.
Yeah. And lots of people come into the philosophy by the way of nature study. They kind of love that, and then yeah, just kind of enter in. So I talk about nature study. And then one of my favorite chapters, funnily enough, is the investors in cultural capital. And I talk a lot about, I could have written chapters and chapters on this, but I basically talk about art, music, and poetry.
My
And those, I can talk about that all day. They're three really important things in my own rhythm of my life. And you know, even when it gets crazy busy in our house and there are other things going on academically, we always have a point in the week where we come around art, poetry, music, you know, and that's,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And
And
I can't sing about it loud enough. I just think it's fantastic, and it's so good for children of all ages to engage with it regularly.
you love Impressionism. Is that
I
right?
love all sorts of things, really. I'm just looking at that painting behind you. It's one of my favorites. I love
Is it
that, the
really?
gatherings. I love it. Yeah. I've
That
got it
one
up.
is, yeah.
I did have it up. I change my art all the time in here, but yeah, I love so many things. At the moment, this morning we were looking at Turner. Turner's one of our favorites. I know this won't be on, but we can see it top of there somewhere. There we go. There's
Yes.
I'm showing you on
Yeah.
my camera, but I've Turner and Rembrandt up there.
Rembrandt.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, love it. So that was a such a fun chapter to write. I love that one. And then reframing motherhood is really looking around. Charlotte Mason has this famous quote about mothers going out to play. If mothers could only
Ah,
do for
yeah.
their children, sorry, do for themselves what they can do for them for their children,
Yeah.
then we would have happier households. Let mothers go out to play.
Yeah.
And you know, we can kind of interpret that in different ways. But what she actually is talking about, and she frames it around this picture of the Madonna, this serenity of the soul, this kind of peace, and how she recognized in mothers that we can be so fraught and busy and stressed and so doing for our children, that she just basically framed it around, look, you also need to get out in nature. You also, and not, you know, on our own, you also need to be reading. You need to get some good sleep. You, you know, you need to do these things to refresh your soul so that you can grow as well. And it wasn't just, and it's very different from, to me, it's the way she talks about it is different from our modern concept of maybe me time.
Mm.
And no, nothing wrong with that. I'm just the terminology.
Yeah.
And so I talk in the book about this kind of cultivating that inner, that soul space. And I know you talk about wonderful things
That
about
is
self-care.
definitely what
Um,
I'm talking about. Yep.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then have a whole chapter on this concept of staying intellectually alive.
Yep.
And this is very much about, you don't have to be, you know, you don't have to have a PhD or even a you know, bachelor's to be doing this life, but actually we are responsible for staying intellectually alive. So that might just be reading a challenging book, or keeping reading, having audiobooks on the go, listening to stimulating podcasts, you know, having people in your life that you can that can kind of trigger those interesting conversations, and it's all about you having ideas as well, and you continuing to think. And then I talk about kinship through community, so I talk about friendship and not walking alone in this. And yeah, and I wrap up the book about talking about legacy, which again is one of my favorite things, just like we are the ones to continue this work. So it is a full book, and it's not even a very long book. So I think you can get, you know, I wanted people to be able to get these sort of images of this kind of holistic approach to their children, how to create this educational environment, but also looking at the mother. I think the whole picture is so important. Um, yeah. So
I
yeah,
love your humor, and I love your humor in your podcast, Modern Miss Mason. When I
thank you.
was listening to your podcast episode about announcing, you had a pause, announcing your pregnancy. I was like, oh, oh, of your book. Bring it, girl. Whatever. Have your fifth. Go.
Oh my goodness. Well, I feel like it's been with COVID in the middle, I felt like it went from announcing the book to being in people's hands in January. I'm like, this is the longest, it's like an elephant's pregnancy. It's like the longest pregnancy ever. But it's gonna be in people's hands. It's nearly there, which is great.
Well, your book is as great as, I mean, it's just a beautiful piece that really I encourage people to read. But your podcast, I mean, your husband is hilarious.
I
Okay.
know.
Tell him I say, I remember number 4. Repeat,
I
repeat, repeat.
repeat, repeat, repeat.
Yeah.
He spoke at my conference in the summer, and he did a kind of version of that talk, and I'd not heard it live before. And he really played on the repeat bit, and we caught us every time. Everyone was rolling in the aisles laughing. But yeah, he's great. And because we both come from a background of education,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to bring those two voices together and hear his his take on all that. I've had lots of great feedback about that conversation.
It's very funny. He is very
Thanks.
funny. All I'll say is role play. Wow, I have not heard a conversation about role play in the homeschool podcast realm, but bring it, Dave.
Cheeky one. I'm like, when you're editing the podcast, I was like, shall I leave that in? Oh, forget it.
Absolutely. If I've learned anything over the last number of years, it's people relate to authenticity.
They
And they
do.
would rather listen to you say things that are like, wait, what did he say? I love it. Bring it. So
Thank you.
I remember number 4. Coincidentally, I don't remember all of them, but all of the points to your last podcast episode were about how to help kids learn or to really have the learning stick. And it's just a valuable episode for anybody in every philosophy or approach to homeschooling. But I just want to switch to something that you spoke to on your blog too. So you got writing all over the place.
Yeah.
You speak, you are my heart. This is how I grew up, as I really, writing was an expression of who I am, my voice. And the
Mm.
more I wrote, the more authentic I became. And at a certain point, there was a crisis point, though, where I realized people are reading what I'm writing and they know what I'm thinking. And
Yes.
wait, what? But it does
Yeah.
help you own who you are.
Right.
You spoke about a motherhood and you said we don't think we're superwoman, but we often think we have to be. It really is okay to not have it all together, to not get it right first or the second time, to be in a mess or not quite know what your next move is. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's truth from,
It's
and it's easy to say from our perspective when we have kids growing up and graduating. And I still think though homeschool moms are super women. I really do.
yeah,
Training
they
people.
are really. I know.
Yeah.
I know because and I think I often if you could to get a little look into the homes all over the world where we're spending time with our children educating. A lot of people are running businesses from home, then they're popping into the kitchen and getting dinner going, and then they're putting some laundry on, and their brains thinking about the next thing. I mean, it's pretty amazing, isn't
God.
it, that
Yeah.
you're so, and not that I we often do this whole multitasking thing, and we're doing all sorts, but we don't. There are days when we are genuinely exhausted, and we
Yeah.
know, I think it's knowing when you've got to rest and having rest as part of the rhythm of all that other stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
But we do it because we have this amazing sense of purpose and responsibility in it. And I have my moments where I'm like, why do I have to do all this? I
Yes.
I need a maid, I need a cook, I need a gardener. And then you have other days where you're like, I can do all this. But we just take it in our stride, don't we? And I love that we're not alone in it, that there are so many of us all across the world who are like, I want this lifestyle. I'm choosing to be fully present in this. And it looks so different to everybody. Some
Yeah.
people wouldn't even entertain, running a business at the same time from home, or even
Yeah.
doing it, so it's just different. But I think, remember, one of the things I often say in coaching and in my workshop is it's important to remember who you are.
Yeah.
When you're up to your eyeballs in nappies and diapers, and you're breastfeeding as a toddler at your ankle,
Yeah.
and you've got another one shouting in the corner, I need help with maths, and and you fall into bed exhausted with a child often.
Yeah.
And you have to have people around you, or have those moments where you remember who you are, remember your gifts, remember what brings you up, makes you come alive. And even if it's 5 minutes a week, like, make room for those things.
Yes, that's
Um,
actually what I say. It's just 15 minutes.
yeah,
I mean, actually, my
absolutely.
practices, I share them all the time with people, and I'm not where they're at. And
No,
it feels like it was just yesterday, but it wasn't. That 4 kids at home, and my kids are all little when I started homeschooling, but not right from the beginning years. And I felt absolutely overwhelmed. And if someone were to come in and say just 15 minutes a week, I'd be like, where?
I
Where?
know, I know. Yeah,
But you just
you do
shoot.
feel like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
And
have
I
to do
think
it.
we're more than ever, we have got just having things like audiobooks. Audiobooks are like I remember when they first started to really use them, that as a child was maybe falling asleep and I was tired, I'd be listening to something, or I could just read something quietly while I was breastfeeding, or just those tiny habits that I remember engaging with.
Mhm.
Um, and I try and get up before the children, and inevitably somebody would join me every morning. But it changes, doesn't it, Teresa? You will get there,
It
and
really
it
does.
it really does change. And
I know. I
like
actually
you
started where my kids were bringing me coffee to the bed
said.
at maybe 3 or 4 years in, and are like, "Should we homeschool now?" And I'm like, "Right, right, right. Okay." And now, because I am middle-aged, I wake up at 5 before the rooster crows. Literally,
Oh,
I have a rooster.
oh,
So you spoke about practices to align with the values of your heart, and that is very much reflected in, obviously, in Charlotte Mason, but it's obviously reflected also in what you just said, that that's the goal, is to align with our values in our heart. So then that means that shows up in how we do homeschooling, or how we decide what activities we're going to include for us. And I think that's just beautiful.
yeah, it's really important, isn't it? And I think you do have to pause and remember what they are, and just like we've said, add them back in slowly. And sometimes you remember. I've got friends who suddenly will pick up an easel again and a canvas and get some paint and
Yeah.
stuff they used to do when they were teenagers or in their 20s, and they suddenly remember, oh, I can
I
do
used to
this.
do this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. And
Me
that's kind of
too.
how I was with poetry. I there's one poem in the book, but I used to write poetry constantly when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I have journals full in my loft here. And it wasn't really until I'd lived a bit and experienced all the things, that I began to remember, I want to put these words down. I need to express this in a certain way. And started to write poetry again. And it's interesting, it kind of brings this younger self alive again, thinking, oh, I remember this feeling, I remember this person. And there are so many things that I think are in women, in mothers, that you need to remember. You need to go back to it and remind yourself who you are.
What a remarkable segue, because I was going to ask you how your writing began.
Yeah, I think it began with poetry, and I always loved books.
Yeah.
um my family had books around the house. Both my parents were readers, and they um I loved reading. I think out of all my siblings, I was the one reading, reading, reading.
Mm.
And poetry was where I began to write. I journaled as well. I used to
Yeah.
journal, and I wrote poetry. And I started when I got into I think I was at university and got into my early 20s, I started to travel more. And
Mm.
travel was a great inspiration for writing, but it
Yeah.
always veered towards poetry. That's kind of where it went all the time. And which is interesting, really, because that's kind of, I do have that poetic, when I often have to pick through that, like even writing prose, going, okay, this sounds like a poem here. I need to just, what am I doing with this? But that is just learning all the time about how you approach that. So I think when I entered into motherhood, as many of us did, the blogosphere was available to us, and I really started to put things out on a blog, which I don't think it exists anymore, that very beginning. Maybe it does somewhere. I don't know. And started to, write about my experiences of mothering, and that I again, I just found great joy in it. It was never a pressure. It was never stressful. And occasionally I'd write a piece that would really, it would really strike home for some people, and I'd see it shared around. And I was like, oh, people like that. That kind of makes, they agree with it, or they find, an agreement with them in their life. So yeah, and then it wasn't until I was really into probably my 30s that I started to think, this is definitely what I want to do. I want to pursue this more. So I wrote an ebook of essays. Again, it needs re-editing and putting back up, but I self-published a book of essays on motherhood. Some people listening may have got it, may have downloaded that, and it was called Moments on Motherhood. And that was my biggest project, really, where I just kind of put a load of stuff together, and I love that essay format. I do like essays now. And that I self-published that. And then I think really what happened then, I just continued to, very much our platforms are, I mean, it looks so different now. You're writing little bits for Instagram, and I started writing for magazines and writing, articles for other people. And and it wasn't until a few years ago when I was connected with an agent, and that started to flourish, that reality of putting something, having a published project out into the world became a reality. And it's incredible. So, and I'm glad that I'm 47. Don't mind saying my age. And
You're so young. I'm
Thanks.
49 next
Oh,
week.
almost.
So young.
Almost the same.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have wanted this any earlier. I'm, like some people are like in publishing in their 20s, and it's great. It's great. I mean, go for it. I think it's fantastic. But I know for my life and the journeys I've done and the stuff that I've learned and the hard things I've walked through and the kind of bits of wisdom I've gained, you put all that into your writing. And I've only scratched the surface with that so far, but I feel like I'm ready to have stuff out in the world. And I don't know if I'd have been in a place to do that when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm late 40s, 50s staring me in the face. And I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to share my words with the world,
Yeah.
and whatever that looks like. And because it is vulnerable. It is
Very,
I am nervous because but it's a good nervous feeling. I'm not, you don't want to be arrogant about this kind of opportunity. I'm so utterly grateful to be able to do this. But at the same time, it won't be for everybody. Some people won't, it may not be the reflection of the Charlotte Mason they know, and they have, and that's fine. But I don't know about you, Teresa, but when you get to our age, you kind of don't care about some of those things anymore.
legit don't care. And I'm not saying that in a contrary.
No,
I actually
no.
don't care. But I've learned, I learned the other side of life, that I was trying to be something that wasn't me because I thought it was nice and acceptable and appropriate. And
Yeah.
that's cool. Except that means you're not there. And so you think those people around you like you, and you don't understand why certain people don't like the nice, but it turns out some people don't like nice people. And so you might as well just own who you are.
Yeah,
And then some people won't like you and some people will, and that's cool, but you are fully you, and you more clearly or cleanly connect with people when you're
that's
being
right.
more authentic. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And when when you're writing a book, you recommend, you're advised to have a kind of a reader avatar, someone who you write. And I say it in the acknowledgements, people can read it. There are 4 real life younger mums who I wrote this book for. And I can picture them now, and I could picture them every day when I write. And I know it's for them, and I know it's for them and who they represent. And that was so liberating, knowing, because I know them all as individuals. I've mentored them and still do over various points of their life. And I just knew as every word this is for them and who they represent. And
Yeah.
so when people don't like it, or if they like, this is not for me, or this is not, like, well, it's not for you, then it wasn't for you. And
Yeah.
that's fine. There are many, many fabulous books in the world that are not for me. And I just, like I said, I read off recommended lists sometimes and I'm like, I don't want to finish this book.
Yeah.
I think as a writer, growing in confidence and your ability at the same time, knowing when something finally gets out there. And the beauty of working with a publisher is that you have that team and an editor and so many eyes looking on it, which is wonderful. That's a privilege, having so many people look at it and make it better all the
Yeah.
time. That when it finally goes out there, it's ready. Like, I know that this is ready. And so here we go. It feels like, right, we'll jump straight in with this one and see
Keep
what happens.
developing, yeah, and then you keep
Yeah,
developing your voice, keep connecting in community,
that's right.
and
That's right.
as Charlotte Mason says, empowering the governesses.
Yes. Whoever they are, whatever
Whoever
they
they
might.
are, your editors, your agent.
Yeah.
The last quote that I want to share is, "It may be that the souls of all children are waiting for the call of knowledge to awaken them to delightful living," Charlotte Mason says.
Favorite. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful quote, and I think when we look at ourselves as homeschool moms, we are also those children waiting for the call of knowledge to awaken us to delightful living.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that language around awakening? I think that is
Yeah.
exactly what the Charlotte Mason philosophy does. It definitely awoke me when I was a younger mom and a younger homeschool mom. And it has that, whatever that was, has not fallen asleep again. And I just think it's just, and she talks about light, more light is I can't remember the exact quote, it's probably in my room somewhere, but more light is there for those who see when you're looking for things. And um that actually, if you open yourself up to this and you start to walk into it and you step into the wide space that it is, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is my experience of the Charlotte Mason philosophy. I think often it's communicated as this tightrope that you might fall off and you can go wrong. That is not my experience. It's a wide open, spacious place. And yes, that is that quote. I've got it on a wooden plaque on my bookshelf. Somebody had it made for me, but that
Oh,
awakening us to delightful living.
yeah,
I want to live a delightful life and a
yeah.
delightful day. And I think I want to inspire my children to do that as well. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
So beautiful. I wish I were, watching you writing in front of Charlotte Mason's, I think sh her burial space
A
in
grave, yes.
yes,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. The
that right
poem.
there. What a spiritual experience that must have been.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I visited there many a time.
Yes.
But this particular one, when I knew I was up in the Lake District writing, and I'd written the chapter on nature study up there, and I just was thinking about legacy, and I knew I wanted to put a poem into the book. And that particular day, yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw the celandines and the dandelions on her friend's grave, and just this whole thing, it just came to me. And obviously I've edited it over and over again, but yeah. So I won't say too much because people can read that. But yeah, what I describe in the poem, I absolutely did that. I did what I said is in the poem, which was a fun experience.
Yeah, a beautiful experience. Thank you
It
for being
was.
here today. I would love for you to share what opportunities other homeschool moms have in connecting with you and where obviously we can find your book.
Yeah, so the book is available wherever you buy books from. I know that it is available on the big A all over the world, but it will be hopefully in bookshops all over as well. Definitely, I mean, in the States you'll find it all over
Yeah,
because it's an American publisher. So but yeah, wherever you can buy books from, Modern Miss Mason by Leah Boden, and then basically type Modern Miss Mason into your search engine and all the things will come up. I've got a website with lots of things on there, coaching,
yeah.
workshops, a course, and then I'm Probably my most like I hang out the most on Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's where you'll find me doing stories and talking to the camera. And I've dabbled with other bits and pieces like YouTube, but actually Instagram is it's just there. It's available, isn't it? So yeah, but come and find me. That would be great.
Such a pleasure chatting with you. Okay,
Oh,
when
you
for
too.
coffee.